Hello and welcome to the first in a series of build videos for the SecKit SK Go. So without further ado, let's get started. These are the rails that are going to make up the main frame of your printer. They are in two separate size dimensions. You have the 20 by 40 rails and the 20 by 20 rails, which basically just means they're 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters, and these are 20 millimeters by 40 millimeters. Now these have all been pre-cut, pre-drilled and tapped where necessary for your build, but what we will need to do before we go any further is to remove the plastic protective film which is on each rail, and remove any swarf or fine fragments of metal that are left over from the cutting and tapping process. I am going to use a small battery operated hoover for this and a soft brush, just to make sure that all the swarf and all the small pieces of aluminium are removed before we go any further. After thoroughly cleaning the extrusions, you may find some small burrs where they have been drilled through from this side, and there are some burrs on the other side. Now the easiest way I found to clean these off is a 6mm masonry drill bit. The reason why, it has the wide shanks on the top of the drill bit, which will just go in and clean that swarf from around the hole without enlarging the hole at all. Just simply push it in, spin it round to clean the swarf off, and then clean the swarf away. Next we need to pre-assemble our ACM brackets. So we have our 9 triangular, our 2 square, our 2 rectangular, our power bracket, and our M4x8 bolts and T-nuts. The first thing we must do is remove the plastic coating from these pieces. Now please be aware the plastic coating is only on one side, so as you remove the plastic coating, you have a dark side and you have a light side. You do not need to remove that, just this plastic coating here. So we'll do that for all those parts and then we'll come back and put them together. Next we must loosely assemble the T-nut and the M4x8 bolt through the ACM bracket using the diagram to show you where to place the bolts. The yellow holes are where you place the bolt, and the white holes are the areas that you leave clear for use in future. So you would put in there, 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 leave that one empty, and there. Then on these ones you would do there and there, leave that one empty, there and there. So it's fairly straightforward. So you take your bolt, place it in from the top, turn it over, take your T-nut, put it onto the bottom like that, and that is your orientation. So the chamfered edges are at the bottom, but the cutaway edges are at the top. This is so when you feed it into the extrusion, like so, and we give it a little tighten, you can see there how it rests into the end. Just like that. So we shall insert all these T-nuts and bolts, and then we'll come back and continue. So there you can see all the brackets assembled and ready, and now we will go on to pre-assemble the 20 brackets, requiring the round head bolts M4x8s again, 2 T-nuts of M4 design, and the 2 washers M4x12x1. So there are your 12 brackets. We're using the 4x8s and the T-nuts to match as before, and I believe this is the bag with the correct washers, just labelled 04. So these are built bolt, washer through the bracket, which can be a little fiddly, and then T-nut from the bottom like so. That's how it looks at the bottom. As you can see, the bolt and the washer to the top, so you do that there and also in that hole for every one of the 12 brackets. So with those 12 brackets done, we then move on to the next section, which is assembling the right frame. For this you will need this plate here, which again has a protective film over it, which is a simple matter of peeling back like so, and we're ready to start building this section. So to assemble the right frame, you need 1 aluminium Y plate, 2 20x40 aluminium extrusions, 1 aluminium extrusion. In my case it's the 380mm one, as I am building an SK Go Z300. 2 other aluminium extrusions. These are 440mm, as we are building the SK Go. 4 AMC triangle brackets, 2 pre-assembled 2020 brackets, 4 M6x20 bolts, 4 round head bolts M4x8, 4 M4 T-nuts, and the printed assembly guide. Now if you ordered your printed parts to be sent with your kit, what you're looking for is something like that. Otherwise you will need to print these items. The STL files for all these you will find on the SK Go GitHub, and there will be a link in the description to the GitHub and also to the printed file section. So having studied the instructions, you need to put an M4x8 bolt and T-nut into the hole there, there, there and there, with the bolt from the top like so, and then the nut loosely onto the bottom. Do this for all 4, and then we will slide the extrusion into place. So with those 4 in place, we slide one of the 2 440mm extrusions over the T-nuts like so, and then we'll turn it over and we will loosely tighten those 4 up just so it holds the rail in place for now. Like so, and now we will line up and fit the 20x40 extrusions. One that will fit like so, and the other that will fit at this end like so. Taking one of your 20x40 extrusions, find the end which is tapped for the bolt, place it on like that, and screw in the bolts into the top. Do this just loosely for now, so you have room to set and align the frame correctly. At this stage, should you need to, you can push the 20 by 20 this direction to tighten up any gap you could have here, just like so. Now fit the other 20 by 40 extrusion, making sure you have the threaded end to the top, and please note that this fits the opposite way to the one on the other side, so this sits that way like that. And screw in your M6 by 20 bolts like so, and nip them up. So with your centre bar correctly fitted, with your brackets pointing to the right direction, you then need your guide to measure the distance between there and this extrusion, which is why you haven't tightened it too much. You can now just slide this up and check you have the correct distance, like so. Once you're happy that that's snug, like that, you can now tighten this bottom bracket. Like so. Which now means you can fit this bottom corner bracket to here. And then once you've done that, you can flip it over, use this at the top to check you have the right distance at the top, and you can actually slide it up and down like that, or actually come in from there like so, so you can check the distance there, and you can check the distance there and make sure that that is perpendicular all the way down. I suggest if you have a T-square, an engineer's T-square available, use it to check you have a 90-degree angle on all these four corners. So I shall grab mine and we shall do that next. So with those done, we can now fit the corner brackets to the top two corners, making sure that you get the placement of the hole right for each side. Give them a little wiggle till they fit in, like so. Try to get them as flush and as straight as possible, and then give them a little nip up as well. Now we can fit this bottom corner bracket, making sure to get the orientation correct, with the hole in the correct position. Place it loosely into the frame. Do not tighten it fully at this point, as there is some adjustment to make. Insert the other 440mm extrusion into place, and just give those T-nuts a small tighten, like so, still allowing for movement for when we set up the upright. So now take your two pre-assembled 2020 brackets, fit one to the bottom, getting it as flush as possible with the extrusion. Give that a little tighten. If you find that it hasn't seated correctly, like so, just loosen it back off again. Give it a little shake, and you will find that it'll set itself in. So do the bottom and the top exactly the same way. Again, it's not quite taken, so give it a little shake, and then you'll feel it grab. You can set it like so, and then this we're going to feed into that section there. Now this is the reason why we haven't tightened this up, because we now need to slide this down so this extrusion goes down, so that will fit into the bottom. So we carefully tie that extrusion down. We loosely fit this into here. Again, nothing should be tightened all the way up at this stage. So with your centre bar correctly fitted, with your brackets pointing to the right direction, you then need your guide to measure the distance between there and this extrusion, which is why you haven't tightened it too much. You can now just slide this up and check you have the correct distance, like so. Once you're happy that that's snug, like that, you can now tighten this bottom bracket. Like so. Which now means you can fit this bottom corner bracket to here. And then once you've done that, you can flip it over, use this at the top to check you have the right distance at the top, and you can actually slide it up and down like that, or actually come in from there like so. So you can check the distance there, and you can check the distance there and make sure that that is perpendicular all the way down. I suggest if you have a T-square, an engineer's T-square available, would use it to check you have a 90-degree angle on all these four corners. So I shall grab mine and we shall do that next. So with your engineer's square, you can now check you are perpendicular with your frame. Make any small alterations you may need to, and then tighten everything up, also trying to make sure that you're flush across the extrusions in all directions, thus making sure your frame is perfectly square and perpendicular, which will aid in the smooth running of the linear bearings and the lead screws. Now is a good time to check that your T-nuts have located properly. If there are any that haven't located, just loosen the bolt back, tap the T-nut slightly so it rotates, and tighten it back up. But as you can see, mine have all placed themselves correctly, so we're ready to move on to the next stage, which is assembling the left frame. So as you can see, assembling the left frame is quite a similar procedure, except for this bottom bracket here, which is the bracket for the power supply switch. That is the main difference. So follow the instructions carefully. I will be using a 380mm extrusion here, as I have the SK Go Z300, and I will be using two 400mm extrusions here, as I have the SK Go, and then we use the same M6x20 bolts, and we will assemble that in a similar fashion. So we start with inserting the M4 T-nuts in bolts into there, there, there and there. So with the bolts and T-nuts now fitted, we will now slide in the extrusion. This is exactly the same process as we did for the other side. Just line it up, slide them home, get them roughly set, and just loosely tighten them so we can move them to check the squareness later. Then take your last four M6x20 bolts, your two 20x40 extrusions, again making sure to have your tapped threads to the top, like so. And with this orientation, we have this extrusion here like so, this extrusion on here like so, bolts to the top and tighten them up. So with that top rail correctly in place, we can now fit these two brackets here and here, checking the orientation and making sure that the empty spaces are in the correct position. they will fit like so. So we'll just bob those on and give those a little snick up, but as usual, not too tight just yet, not until we make sure the frame is completely square. So with those two brackets now in place, we can take our central bar here, which is 380mm for me, as I am doing the SK Go Z300. Yours could be slightly different, as we can see. If you were doing the Z350, it would be a 430mm version. If you're doing a mini, it would be a 330mm version, but like I say, we are doing the SK Go Z300, so it is the 380mm fitting. Take your 20x20 bracket for the top and your 20x20 bracket for the bottom and fit them to this extrusion even, making sure not too tight so you've got room to maneuver later. So those two fitted, I'm now going to turn the frame over to lay it easier onto the table, more flat, or flatter. More flat isn't even English. Which now means we have to rotate the orientation of this so it goes in that way instead, but it does make fitting the bottom rail a lot easier. As you can see, that now you can see where everything sits, but remember to invert this so it looks the opposite direction from the way it does on the diagram. If you look on the diagram, we have the large portion here looking to the left, but I've now inverted it so the large portion there is now headed this direction. There it is there, you see. So that is now turned around the other way, but it does make setting up these bottom corners a fair bit easier. So we'll loosely tighten these two into here like so, and then we'll flip the frame back over to fit the corner brackets. So with those now loosely fitted, we will flip the frame back over like so, and we will fit the corner piece into there like that, and then we will continue. So with our bracket loosely in place, we're now going to flip it back over and line it up with our guide. Just as a suggestion, while fitting this at this point, if you get a tape measure and measure from the inside of that extrusion about 253mm or 25.3 centimeters from that extrusion to here, that will roughly put this in the right position. Rather than setting it central and having to slide it a long way this direction, if you set it, like I say, to roughly, I would say about 200, maybe 254mm in, that will save you a lot of work when you flip the frame over, making sure you do it carefully, not twisting anything too much. Bring it back down. Now when you come to check this distance from here to here, you will find you haven't got a great deal that you need to move it. That's just quite close. So what we'll do is we'll fit this bracket first to give us some stability, and then we will get our guide, get that set perfectly correct there, and then fit the bracket to here. So this is the power supply bracket that goes into this corner. So fit it as you have done the others. I back the screw right out and then tighten it up, as that helps the T-nut to sit properly. So that's held like that. Now we will check this distance with the guide and then fit the bottom bracket. So with your bottom bracket in place, just double check your distances on here. As you can see, I'm just the slightest bit tight there and a little bit loose there, so we'll just a little bit of alteration on here just to make sure we're absolutely spot on, and then we tighten everything else up, again making sure everything else is square, perpendicular not forgetting to use your engineer's square just to make sure everything is absolutely right before you tighten it up. So now we're going to fit the back panel and the bottom rails. As you can see, we need 2 aluminium extrusions of 470mm. They go across there and there. We need the back panel, which is the large metal sheet, 18 round head bolts, which are M4x8s, and 18 M4 T-nuts. Now, as you can see, they say to sit this off the end of the table, and they also ask you to put an extrusion underneath to aid support and lining up. So what we actually do is we sit this onto the table like this with a spare extrusion that you're not using yet. Place it into the corner like that. Then take your 470mm extrusion and sit it like that. And then when you come round to the back to look, you will see that this is the temporary extrusion that we're resting on. This is the correct extrusion, and your T-nut and bolt need to go through this hole here. So this is the rail we're fitting, which is being supported off the end of the table and off this temporary rail that we have here. So I'm going to fit the bolt and the T-nut first, and then slide the rail on, and then just nip it up, and then we'll do the same for the other side. So as you can see, have it supported by this temporary rail here, this screw and T-nut in place this side, this T-nut in place in this side, and then we have the front rail supported by a temporary rail there. And what we're going to do now is we're going to drop the plate onto the top in the correct orientation, looking at the diagram. Right, so I've removed the protective coating from the back panel and I've changed the camera position. Don't want you to get confused, so basically what I have done is this front corner here, according to your instruction manual, which you should be following, is this corner here. Okay, so the central slot there is this central slot here. And I hope that makes sense to you. So what they want you to do is to put the T-nuts and bolts in 1, 2, 3, 4 holes there, not this one is for later. 1, 2, 3, 4 holes there, not that one's for later. And then the 4 in the back corner here and the 4 in the back corner here. So T-nuts and bolts on, we'll drop it back into place, tighten them up, and then we'll have a look at the next step. So with all the bolts in place, it should look something like this. So now we will move on to assembling the front panel. For this you will need your display cover, your reset button, 4 M3x20 bolts, 4 M3 nuts, 2 round head bolts M4x8, 2 T-nuts, the M4, and then we have the front frame, which are these 2 extrusions here, which are the SK Go, the 430mm ones, 2 of the angled brackets, the triangle ones, and 2 of the 20x20 brackets. I'm using this version of the display panel, the cover, which you can find on the GitHub. This was literally released a couple of days ago at time of recording this. I've gone for the long reset button that goes with it, and that just slots into the back of the frame like that. Then you take your display, like so. You remove the knob from the front of your display. You may find this slightly difficult. Just give it a good tug, it'll come. And then we sit the frame into the case like so, and then we will in-screw the 4 screws, and then there is the knob that you've printed, which goes on the front like so. But remember to put this screw in first, because otherwise the knob wheel gets in the way. So there's the pack containing the M3 by 20 bolts and the M3 nuts, and we simply put a bolt in from the front through the screen to the back, and take your fingers, very carefully place the nut over there and then tighten up. It's important that you don't put too much pressure on this nut and bolt, as you do not want to flex the screen when you're doing it, so just enough to nip it up. You do that for all the four corners, and then we'll put the knob on the front. So with the screen now nicely in place, we'll place that to one side. Now we will take one of the 430mm extrusions. This is going to sit into the front of your frame here. It's going to be held in place by two of your triangular sections, making sure that the hole is located in the upright. So it will go in something like that and sit in like that, and then the same on this side. And then we will take a measurement. I use my calipers, you can use a tape measure, but we'll take a measurement from the floor here to the height of the bottom of this rail, so we can then measure here and do the same, so this rail is at the same height all the way around. Now remember not to fully tighten this, as you will need to make some adjustment when we have this in place to make sure the frame is totally square. But we'll just nip one of those up, making sure the T-nut actually moves. Like I said before, if you find that your T-nut doesn't turn, if you unscrew it all the way and then screw it back in, that generally will make the T-nut grip. So on this side we'll do the same. So I'll just tighten that one up. That one's gripped. And tighten this one up. Now you see neither of those have actually gripped, so if we loosen that all the way off until you can hear it clicking like that, and then tighten it again, that has now turned the T-nut at the back and it's taken hold like so. So now we should get our digital calipers, and we will measure the distance from the bottom of this side extrusion to the floor, and then we can copy that across to there. So for the ease of showing you, what I will actually do is I shall zero my micrometer, and I shall actually take a measurement from the top of the rail to the floor. Tighten it off like that, and we'll check it there to make sure it's the same. It's approximately 35mm. I've got 34.97, so that's a fairly good approximation. So then all I will do is I will take that screw slightly back, take that screw slightly back, and then we will lower this down until we touch the floor like that. Make sure that that's square. Just do that measurement again like that, and then we'll just snick that up. Come over to this side, we'll lower that one down. That's now touching. I should just put a little snick on that. We'll take in the middle, Perfect. Check there again. Just needs to come up slightly because of the angle it was at, so we'll just bring it up the tiniest of amounts, like so, and we'll check that again. That's perfect, absolutely spot on. So now we can just nip up the rest of these. As you can see, wind them out first, then wind them in, and then I know they've got a decent hold. So that's now those all in place. So now we'll fit the display in place. I've put 2 of the 4x8mm bolts into the bottom of there with the T-nuts below. That sits on the frame here. Now its final position will be over this side like this. But what we'll do is we'll have it in the middle for the moment, which means when we're locating this extrusion, we'll be able to get a close approximation of the correct height. So fit this in. You may find it's a little tight. Just go carefully, lower it down, and you'll see that fits quite nicely in there. The distance between here and here is 90mm. So if you have your caliper to hand and you set it at 90mm, you will be able to judge that distance perfectly like that. Then all you do is fit your 20x20 brackets into this side, the other one into this side, and when I've done that, I will slide that over to the side like that, tighten the bolts up for there, and we're ready to go. So with those brackets now fastened into place, I've been able to slide the screen right up to this side so it's flush with the corner of this bracket here. The push button on the dial still works, reset button still works, so that's nicely set up and ready for the next stage. So now we need to fit the brackets to the bottom of the frame. We need the 2 square cut triangles, the 2 rectangular cut triangles, the final aluminium extrusion, which is 470mm, and 2 more of the pre-assembled 2020 brackets. So we're going to take the printer from this position and lay it onto its back like so, and then we need to fit triangular one into that corner, triangular one into that corner, and then the rectangular ones into whichever way round they go, which is that way like that, and this one goes in that way like that. So we'll fit those using exactly the same method as before. So we now take our last 470mm extrusion. That is going to fit into the frame there with 2 of the 20x20 ankle brackets, one at either side like so, and then I will use my engineer's square to work off the top of the extrusion here across to here, and the top of the extrusion here across to here, to make sure we've got that level as well. So now with that in place, we can lift the frame back to its correct orientation, and at this point it's a good idea to check that it sits level, doesn't wobble in any way, shape or form. You want to check all your joints everywhere that an extrusion meets an extrusion. Make sure there are no gaps absolutely anywhere. Make sure that you're happy that it is level and square. Take measurements if you feel you need to, just to double check everything, and then go around and check every single T-nut and bolt. Give them a little snick up, make sure they're nice and tight, make sure that they're all seated properly and they are all working correctly, and then we are on to the next section. So now we're down to the final part of this first video, which is assembling the bed frame. For this you need the two 370mm extrusions and the two 300mm extrusions and 4 of your pre-made brackets. It's very simply you need one of those at the top, one of those at the bottom, and then these two are going to sit in between like so. You need to make sure, as per the diagram, that the two holes, you have a hole there excuse me, you have a hole there, a hole there, a hole here and a hole here, that they are offset slightly to the right. So those two are nearer to that side and those two are nearer to that side, and then you have your single hole there. So you need to make sure that your center holes are both offset to the same side. You don't want one offset this way and one offset this way. You've got to make sure that they're both offset slightly that direction, and then you get your 4 20 by 20 connectors, put them into the corners. I suggest you do it on a flat surface like this, that way you can make sure everything is flat and perfectly square, and then we'll come back and see how we get on. Once you have it built, place it on a flat surface, check for wobble, then check all your corners, make sure you've got them completely flush on both extrusions, both directions, so you know everything is beautifully square, like so. And that's it. Congratulations, you've built your frame. You're the first step on the ladder to having your SK Go up and running. And that's it. We've got the frame of the printer built. We'll leave it there for today. In the next video we'll do sections 6, 7 and 8 where we put the axes together. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been helpful to you in some way. If it has, leave a comment below and let me know. Hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to me already, please consider that. Hit the bell button next to the subscribe button as well, and then you'll be informed next time I put some content out. If you'd like to support the channel in any way, you can do that via Patreon, Streamlabs or PayPal, but a thumbs up and a nice comment will suffice. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.